Welcome to the third episode in our video series. I'm Dr. David Van Nuys, co-author of the book, This Is The Zodiac Speaking, Into the Mind of a Serial Killer. The Zodiac claimed that he committed dozens more murders than authorities were ever able to substantiate. There were 7 attacks that we know of for sure, and in these, 5 people died. To quickly recap so far, the first attack happened in the Bay Area city of Vallejo, California, just before Christmas 1968. And in that incident, the Zodiac shot and killed 2 teenagers on a lover's lane in Vallejo, California. These first 2 killings were described briefly in episode number 1. If you haven't seen it, you might want to go back and catch that. Episode number 2 described the second attack, again on a holiday, the 4th of July, and again in a secluded makeout area of Vallejo. And again, 2 young people in a parked car late at night are targeted. Both are shot multiple times. The girl dies, but the boy survives, to give a description of their attacker. Only a half hour later, the attacker calls the Vallejo police to taunt them with his most recent attacks, as well as one 7 months earlier. One of the known facts about serial killers is a tendency to evolve. Eventually, the thrill of the kill fades, and there is a growing compulsion to recreate it. And to get back to that first sense of thrill, it may be necessary to escalate the stakes, to raise the excitement. In the first attack, the killer, who would later begin to sign himself as Zodiac, used a .22 caliber pistol. In the second attack, he moves up to a 9mm Luger. Once they realize the 2 Lovers Lane murders are linked, Bay Area newspapers go wild with lots of coverage. We have to believe that the thrill of the kill, plus the thrill of getting away with it twice, must have been exhilarating for Zodiac. But after most of a month and no solid clues, the newspapers have lost interest and they move on to other stories. At this point, the Zodiac evolves in what at the time was an unexpected and unprecedented direction. He sends a taunting letter and a cryptogram to 3 Bay Area newspapers, and he brags that if anyone can break the code of his cryptogram, his identity will be revealed. This clever strategy is clearly designed to reclaim the attention he evidently craves. His letter reads as follows, and you'll pardon me if I read it from the book since I haven't memorized it. He writes, "Dear Editor, this is the murderer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know." Christmas, and interestingly, there are many misspellings throughout, and one of the questions is, are these misspellings deliberate or are they symptomatic of something else? He spells Christmas Christ Mass with 2 S's. And then he gives the following list. 1, brand name of ammo, Super X. 2, 10 shots were fired. 3, the boy was on his back with his feet to the car. 4, the girl was on her right side, feet to the west. 4th of July. 1, girl was wearing patterned slacks. 2, the boy was shot in the knee. 3, brand of ammo was Western. What deductions would you make from this letter? Remember, my job was to analyze the Zodiac's letters blind. So when I was first given this letter to react to, I didn't know any of the details of the first 2 Lovers Lane attacks that we've covered so far. I didn't even know that it was the Zodiac serial murder case. I was simply given the letter and asked what conclusions I might draw from it as a psychologist. So here are some of the things that leap out for me when I read the letter, and I'll go back through it with you, and I'm going to need to refer to my notes to do that. The first thing I notice is that he starts off with, "Dear Editor." Now this suggests someone who reads the newspapers and perhaps who has had some fascination with the letters to the editor section. Next, he says, this is the murderer of the two teenagers. Now I'm struck by his labeling himself as a, quotes, murderer. I think most killers justify their actions in one way or another to themselves and tend to use euphemisms. I would expect something like, I'm the one who kept those two kids, or who shot those two kids, or even who killed those two kids. But the word murderer, to apply to oneself, strikes me as a particularly powerful word, one that perhaps aggrandizes him, on the one hand, telling us how powerful and how ruthless he is, and also says to me how far apart from society he sees himself or has set himself. Going on, I'm struck by the fact that he describes the victims as two teenagers. To me, that tells us that he is older than they are, and there are other clues in the letter that support that. Another thing that we need to pay attention to is that it happened on a golf course. Both of the killings, both of the attacks so far happened outdoors. So this causes me to form a mental hypothesis that this may be an outdoorsman, somebody who's interested in the outdoors, maybe a hunter or some other kind of outdoorsman. So that's kind of a hypothesis that we need to keep in mind as we move through his various communications. I've already mentioned the, something else before that. He says, to prove I killed them. So it's in that phrase, it's kind of clear that this is somebody who wants bragging rights. He wants to be able to prove that he was the one. That's another thing that we kind of need to tag mentally, because it tells us something about his personality, and we want to see if there are other things that support that viewpoint. I've already mentioned the misspelling of Christmas, and there are some other interesting misspellings. The fact that he spells it Christ Mass makes me wonder, at least, whether or not he's familiar with the Mass. Was he perhaps raised Catholic? So that is another thing for us to have as a possible hypothesis. Then he gives us this list, this detailed list of facts surrounding the killing. What that tells us is that he is an organized killer as opposed to a disorganized killer, that he's a methodical, detail-oriented person prone to making lists. The other thing that stands out about this list is the absolutely cold-hearted way. I mean, this list, it would be like a grocery list. There's absolutely no emotion attached to the list. So he, for example, the first item on the list, he says, brand name of ammo, Super X. Okay, so that, remember before we were speculating, well, maybe he's an outdoorsman, maybe he's a hunter. The fact that he is able to identify this ammunition as Super X and refers to it as ammo, that's an interesting choice of words. Ammo might suggest that he's either a sort of a paramilitary hobbyist, if you will, the kind of person who would read Soldier of Fortune, perhaps a hunter, or perhaps has been in the military or is a wannabe military person. So I think that's those are the sum of my initial reactions to this first letter, and we're going to be hearing more letters from him as the series goes along. And also there's the cryptogram that he sent, and that one was cracked, by the way, and I think I'll save that for our next episode, and I'll talk about the cryptogram and how that was decoded and what further deductions we might be able to draw from that. So until next time, this is Dr. David Van Nuys.